Your father's will designates the bakery, the building, and all associated business assets to your brother Anton in their entirety, the attorney said, sliding a thin stack of papers across his desk toward me. You're named as recipient of his personal effects, which I understand primarily consist of household items and some sentimental keepsakes. I sat across from him in a leather chair that suddenly felt too small, staring at a document that contradicted 30 years of promises. 30 years of my father telling me, repeatedly, explicitly, that the bakery would be mine, that I was the one who understood the business, who'd sacrificed a different life to keep it running alongside him. That can't be right, I said. My father told me many times that the bakery would come to me. He said it in front of employees. He said it at family dinners. Anton barely worked here for more than a summer at a time. I understand this may be difficult to process, the attorney, a measured man named Barnaby Ostrander, said, his tone carrying the practiced neutrality of someone who delivered difficult inheritance news many times before. But this is the will your father signed, dated 6 weeks before his passing. I was present for the signing myself. I stared down at the signature on that final page, something immediately, instinctively wrong, registering in my mind before I could even articulate exactly what it was. My father's handwriting had grown shaky, deliberate, effortful over his final 2 years battling Parkinson's disease. This signature looked smooth, confident, almost artistically rendered. I had no idea, sitting in that office absorbing what felt like a devastating betrayal, that within 3 months, I'd have forensic proof that the signature on that will could not possibly have come from my father's actual hand during the period it claimed to have been signed. My name is Solveig Marchetti. I'm 52, and for 30 years, I worked alongside my father running Marchetti's Bakery, a family business he built from a single storefront into a beloved neighborhood institution. This is the story of how a forged signature on a fraudulent will nearly cost me the business I'd spent my entire adult life building, and how my own meticulous record-keeping ultimately exposed a scheme between my brother and our family's own attorney. A life built around the bakery. I started working at Marchetti's Bakery when I was 17, sweeping floors and learning to read my father's temperamental old ovens, while my younger brother Anton pursued interests that took him increasingly further from the family business. By the time I turned 25, I'd taken over the bakery's daily operations almost entirely, while my father transitioned into more of an advisory role, still present daily, but increasingly trusting my judgment on everything from recipe development to staffing decisions. I never married, never had children, choosing instead to build my entire adult identity around a business that felt, in every meaningful sense, like my life's work rather than simply a job. My father acknowledged this sacrifice repeatedly over the years, in conversations I remembered vividly and specifically. "This place is yours, Solveig," he told me during one particularly clear conversation about 10 years before his death, sitting together in the bakery's small back office after closing. "Anton has his own path. You're the one who understood what I built here. When I'm gone, I want you to know this will always be your bakery." Anton's distant relationship. Anton left our hometown at 18, pursuing a business degree and eventually a career in commercial real estate development in a city nearly 6 hours away. His visits home grew increasingly infrequent over the years, limited mostly to major holidays and the occasional emergency when our father's health began declining more seriously in his final years. "I don't know how you've stayed here your whole life," Anton told me once, during a rare visit, watching me manage a busy Saturday morning rush with the kind of practiced efficiency 30 years of experience produces. "This place would drive me insane within a month." I never resented Anton's different path specifically, understanding that not everyone shared my particular attachment to the bakery our father had built. What I never anticipated was that his distance from the business, throughout most of his adult life, would somehow, eventually, translate into him inheriting the entirety of it instead of me. Our father's declining health. Our father, Vittorio Marchetti, received his Parkinson's diagnosis roughly 6 years before his death, a diagnosis that initially produced relatively manageable symptoms before accelerating significantly during his final 2 years. I watched his handwriting deteriorate gradually but unmistakably over that period, his signature on daily business documents, checks, and correspondence growing increasingly shaky, effortful, and inconsistent as his tremor worsened. "My hands just don't cooperate the way they used to," he told me, with characteristic dry humor, struggling through signing a delivery invoice roughly 8 months before his death, his signature that day barely legible, each letter formed through visible, deliberate effort. I'd handled the bakery's bookkeeping for 15 years by that point, maintaining an extensive paper trail of documents my father had signed throughout his declining health. Records that would eventually become crucial evidence in exposing exactly what had happened with his final will. The final months. Our father's health declined sharply during his final 6 months, requiring increased medical care and eventually a caregiver who assisted with daily tasks he could no longer manage independently. I spent significant time at his house during that period, balancing bakery responsibilities with caring for a father whose physical capabilities were diminishing rapidly, while his mental clarity, thankfully, remained largely intact. "I need you to promise me something," he told me during one of our final clear conversations, roughly 2 months before his death. "Promise me you'll keep this place running the way we built it together. I know it's yours to carry forward." I promised him exactly that, never imagining I'd need to fight legally to actually claim what he'd so consistently, explicitly promised belonged to me. Anton's increased presence. Anton's visits home increased noticeably during our father's final 6 months, a shift I initially attributed simply to appropriate concern for a dying parent, understanding that even a distant relationship naturally draws closer during a terminal decline. In hindsight, that increased presence coincided precisely with the period during which the fraudulent will would eventually be signed. "I think it's good you're spending more time with Dad," I told Anton during one of his visits, genuinely glad to see him present, despite years of relative distance. "He appreciates you being here, even if he doesn't always say it directly." I had no reason during those visits to suspect Anton was using that increased presence to lay groundwork for a scheme that would eventually strip me of the inheritance our father had promised me for decades. Our family attorney. Our family had used the same attorney, Barnaby Ostrander, for legal matters spanning nearly 2 decades, a relationship built initially by our father and maintained through various business contracts, property matters, and eventually estate planning discussions as his health began declining. I'd met Barnaby several times over the years during routine bakery legal matters, always finding him professionally competent if somewhat distant, never suspecting that this same trusted family attorney would eventually become central to a scheme defrauding me of my rightful inheritance. The will signing. The will that eventually superseded my father's decades of stated intentions was reportedly signed roughly 6 weeks before his death, during a period when his physical condition had deteriorated significantly, his hands trembling severely enough that even simple daily tasks like eating or dressing required substantial assistance. I wasn't present for the signing, a fact that struck me as unusual only in retrospect, given that virtually every other significant legal or financial matter during his final years had involved my direct participation, given my role managing both the bakery and much of his daily care. "Your father wanted privacy for finalizing his estate planning," Barnaby explained when I later questioned the circumstances of the signing. "That's not unusual for sensitive family matters, particularly when a parent wants to avoid the appearance of favoritism during the actual signing process." Learning the will's contents. Our father passed away peacefully at home, roughly 6 weeks after that reported signing, and the will's actual contents weren't revealed to me until the formal reading in Barnaby's office nearly 2 weeks after the funeral, a delay he attributed to standard administrative processing. Sitting in that office, absorbing a document that contradicted 30 years of explicit promises, I felt an overwhelming combination of grief and disbelief that initially left me too stunned to immediately question the document's authenticity beyond simple emotional shock at its unfairness. Noticing the signature. It was Anton, oddly enough, who first drew my attention specifically to the signature itself, flipping through his own copy of the will with visible satisfaction. "Dad's signature looks strong here," he commented, apparently intending it as evidence of our father's clear mental capacity at the time of signing. "You can tell he was completely lucid when he signed this." Something about that comment nagged at me on the drive home. A specific, technical detail my accounting background had trained me to notice almost automatically. I pulled out my own copy of the will that evening, examining the signature more carefully under better lighting than the attorney's dim office had provided. The signature was smooth, confident. The letters flowed together with an ease that bore no resemblance whatsoever to the shaky, effortful signatures I'd watched my father produce on virtually every document during his final 2 years of declining health. Comparing documents. I spent that entire evening pulling every document I could locate bearing my father's signature from the final year of his life, spreading them across my kitchen table in a comparison that immediately confirmed my growing suspicion. A bank signature card from 8 months before his death, a supplier contract from 6 months before, a medical consent form for a minor procedure signed exactly 1 month before his death, just 5 weeks before the will's reported signing date. Every single one of those documents showed the same characteristic shakiness, the same visible tremor-induced irregularity that had defined his handwriting for the preceding 2 years. The will's signature, dated just 5 weeks after that medical consent form, showed absolutely none of that same deterioration. A growing suspicion. "This doesn't make sense," I told my closest friend, Wilhelmina Achterberg, laying out the comparison documents during a visit the following day. "His hands didn't suddenly stabilize 5 weeks before his death. If anything, every account I have from that final period describes his condition worsening, not improving. How does his signature suddenly become smoother and more controlled during the exact period he was declining the fastest?" "That does sound strange," Wilhelmina said, examining the documents herself. "Have you considered that something might actually be wrong with this specific signature, rather than just processing normal grief-related suspicion?" The question crystallized exactly what I'd been circling around without fully articulating to myself. I wasn't simply grieving an unfair outcome. I was looking at physical evidence that something about this document was fundamentally inconsistent with everything else I knew about my father's condition during that period. Consulting a forensic document examiner. I contacted a forensic document examiner, a meticulous specialist named Perpetua Halloway, whose practice specialized in handwriting analysis and signature authentication for legal disputes. I brought her the will alongside the comprehensive collection of comparison documents I'd assembled, spanning my father's final 2 years. "I need you to look at something," I told her during our initial consultation, laying out the timeline and my specific concerns about the signature's uncharacteristic smoothness given his documented physical decline. Perpetua reviewed the materials with careful, methodical attention, examining stroke patterns, pressure variations, and letter formation consistency across multiple documents spanning different time periods. "Give me 2 weeks," she said. "I want to conduct a thorough comparative analysis before offering any preliminary conclusions." The forensic analysis Perpetua's analysis, completed roughly 3 weeks later, confirmed everything my instinctive suspicion had already suggested, presented now with the rigorous technical precision of professional forensic documentation. "The signature on the will you've provided shows fluid, continuous stroke patterns, consistent with someone experiencing minimal to no essential tremor," her report stated. This stands in stark contrast to every comparison document from the same general period, all of which display the characteristic irregular stroke breaks, pressure inconsistencies, and letter distortion typical of advanced Parkinsonian tremor. "In my professional opinion," Perpetua told me during our follow-up meeting, "it is highly improbable, bordering on physically implausible, that the same individual produced both the will signature and the comparison documents within the time frame you've described, given the documented progression of his condition. This signature is either a forgery or was produced during a period inconsistent with the date claimed on the document." Considering the implications. I sat with Perpetua's findings for several days, processing the magnitude of what they suggested. If the signature genuinely couldn't have come from my father during the claimed signing period, that meant someone had either forged his signature entirely or had somehow obtained his signature under circumstances significantly different from what the will's stated date and context implied. Either possibility pointed toward the same conclusion. The will granting Anton the entire bakery had likely been fraudulently produced, potentially with the direct involvement of the family attorney who'd overseen its supposed signing. Consulting an estate litigation attorney. I retained a separate estate litigation attorney, a sharp, experienced woman named Fernanda Oyalaran, who specialized in contested will disputes and had handled several previous cases involving suspected forgery or undue influence in estate planning documents. Perpetua's forensic findings give us substantial grounds to formally contest this will's validity, Fernanda told me after reviewing the complete analysis alongside my extensive collection of comparison documents. But we need to build a comprehensive case before filing, examining not just the signature itself, but the broader circumstances surrounding the will's creation, including Barnaby Ostrander's specific role in facilitating its execution. Investigating the attorney's records. Fernanda filed formal discovery requests targeting Barnaby's complete file regarding the will's preparation and signing, including any correspondence, drafts, or witness statements from the actual signing event, records he was legally required to maintain given his professional obligations. The discovery process revealed several troubling inconsistencies. Barnaby's file contained no contemporaneous witness statements from the signing itself, despite his own recollection during our initial will reading, claiming he'd personally overseen the process. The only witness listed on the will's signature page was a notary employed part-time at Barnaby's own office, someone Fernanda's investigation revealed had only limited independent recollection of the specific signing when later questioned under oath. The notary's testimony. Fernanda deposed the notary, a young woman named Cressida Van Toor, who'd witnessed and notarized numerous documents at Barnaby's office over the preceding several years, making it unsurprising that her specific memory of this particular signing proved limited when examined closely months later. I don't have a specific independent memory of this particular client's signing, Cressida testified. I notarized dozens of documents monthly. I would have followed our standard protocol of confirming the signer's identity and witnessing the physical signature, but I can't recall specific details about this individual's condition or demeanor during the signing, beyond what our standard procedure requires. Her testimony, while not directly damning, established a significant gap in the documented verification process, exactly the kind of gap that could allow a fraudulent signing to occur without triggering standard safeguards. Anton's involvement. Fernanda's investigation also uncovered financial records showing that Anton had made 2 substantial payments to Barnaby's law firm during the exact period the will was reportedly being drafted. Payments significantly exceeding Barnaby's standard estate planning fees and lacking any clear itemized justification in the firm's billing records. These payments raised serious questions about whether Anton was compensating Barnaby for services beyond standard legal representation, Fernanda told me during a case strategy meeting. Combined with the forensic signature evidence, we now have a plausible narrative suggesting collusion between your brother and the family attorney to produce a fraudulent estate planning document favoring Anton's interests. Filing the contest. We filed a formal will contest in probate court roughly 4 months after our father's death, presenting Perpetua's forensic analysis, the extensive comparison document collection, the questionable payment records between Anton and Barnaby's firm, and the notary's limited independent recollection of the actual signing event. Anton's response, filed through separate legal representation once the contest, made continuing to use the same family attorney obviously untenable, characterized my claims as grief-driven speculation, lacking substantive legal merit. A characterization that felt particularly galling given the mounting forensic evidence supporting exactly the opposite conclusion. The deposition. Anton's deposition, conducted roughly 2 months into the litigation process, revealed cracks in his composure once confronted directly with the specific timeline discrepancies and payment records Fernanda's investigation had uncovered. Can you explain these payments to Barnaby Ostrander's firm, made during the exact period your father's will was reportedly being drafted, that exceed his standard estate planning fees by a significant margin? Fernanda asked during the deposition. Those were general consultation fees related to unrelated business matters, Anton said, his answer carrying the particular strain of someone reciting a prepared but ultimately unconvincing explanation. I don't recall the exact specifics of what those payments covered. You don't recall paying nearly $15,000 to an attorney during a 2-month window, Fernanda pressed, despite that amount significantly exceeding any documented invoice for standard legal services during that same period? Anton's inability to provide a coherent explanation for those payments became a central, damaging element of our case as the litigation progressed. Barnaby's deteriorating position. Barnaby, facing mounting pressure from both the forensic evidence and the questionable payment records, eventually retained his own separate legal counsel, recognizing that his professional conduct regarding the will's preparation had become the subject of serious scrutiny extending well beyond simply defending the document's validity. My client maintains that all appropriate legal procedures were followed during the will's preparation and execution, Barnaby's attorney stated during a subsequent hearing, though the statement carried noticeably less confidence than the firm denials offered earlier in the proceedings. The State Bar investigation Fernanda's continued discovery efforts eventually prompted a formal complaint to the State Bar Association regarding Barnaby's conduct, triggering a separate disciplinary investigation running parallel to our ongoing probate litigation. The Bar's investigators, given subpoena power beyond what our civil litigation could independently access, uncovered additional evidence, significantly strengthening our case. Their investigation revealed that Barnaby had visited our father's home on 2 occasions during the relevant time frame, without any billing entry documenting those visits in his standard client records, an omission that, combined with everything else, suggested deliberate concealment of exactly when and how the will's signing had actually occurred. A caregiver's account. Perhaps the most damaging evidence emerged when Fernanda's investigators located and interviewed our father's part-time caregiver during his final months, a woman named Odalie Nkemelu, who'd assisted with his daily care but had never been contacted during the initial will reading or early litigation stages. I remember Mr. Ostrander visiting on a day your father was having a particularly difficult time, Odalie testified during a subsequent deposition. His hands were shaking badly that day, worse than usual. I remember because I had to help him with his lunch afterward, since he couldn't manage utensils well at all that particular afternoon. I don't know exactly what document was being discussed, but I remember specifically thinking it seemed like an unusually difficult day for him to be handling any important paperwork. Odalie's testimony, cross-referenced against the specific date she recalled through her own personal caregiving logs, aligned precisely with the reported signing date on the fraudulent will, directly contradicting any suggestion that our father had been in adequate physical condition to produce the smooth, confident signature the document actually displayed. The full picture emerges. The combined evidence painted an increasingly clear picture. Barnaby had visited our father on a day when his physical condition was demonstrably poor, likely obtained his signature on some document during that visit, potentially without our father fully understanding or being capable of properly reviewing its actual contents, given his declining cognitive processing during difficult tremor episodes, and then somehow produced a will bearing a signature inconsistent with his documented physical state during that period. Whether the actual signature had been traced, forged outright, or obtained through some form of manipulation during a moment when our father lacked full capacity to understand what he was signing, the forensic and testimonial evidence overwhelmingly supported the conclusion that the document didn't represent his genuine, informed final wishes. Settlement negotiations. Facing mounting evidence and Barnaby's own separate disciplinary exposure, Anton's legal team eventually approached Fernanda about potential settlement rather than proceeding to a full trial that increasingly appeared likely to result in the will being voided entirely. They're proposing a revised split of the estate, Fernanda told me during our negotiation strategy session. Given the strength of our evidence, I think we're in a strong position to push for terms that actually reflect what your father consistently stated he wanted throughout his life, rather than accepting a compromise that still rewards this fraudulent scheme. Reaching resolution. After several weeks of negotiation, we reached a settlement granting me full ownership of the bakery and its associated business assets, consistent with decades of our father's explicitly stated intentions, while Anton retained a smaller cash settlement drawn from other estate assets that had been separate from the contested will's primary provisions. "This is what Dad always wanted," I told Wilhelmina after finally signing the settlement documents, feeling a complicated mixture of vindication and lingering grief that no legal resolution could fully address. It just took forensic evidence and months of litigation to actually make it happen. Barnaby's professional consequences. The State Bar's disciplinary investigation concluded roughly 2 months after our civil settlement, finding Barnaby had violated multiple professional conduct rules regarding proper documentation and verification procedures during the will's preparation. His license was suspended for 18 months, and he was ordered to pay restitution covering a portion of my litigation costs, given the bar's finding that his conduct had directly facilitated the fraudulent documents creation. "I trusted that man for 2 decades, I told Fernanda after learning of the bar's final ruling. "My father trusted him even longer than that. It's genuinely disturbing to realize how easily that trust was exploited during exactly the period our family was most vulnerable." Running the bakery alone. I returned to running Marchetti's Bakery with full, undisputed ownership roughly 8 months after my father's death, a resolution that felt both like justice served and like an exhausting, painful process I never should have needed to undertake in the first place, simply to claim what he'd promised me for 30 years. "I keep thinking about how differently this could have gone if I hadn't noticed that signature looked wrong," I told Wilhelmina during one of our regular visits, watching the bakery's morning rush unfold with the same practiced rhythm I'd maintained for decades. If Anton had chosen a slightly better forger, or if Barnaby had been more careful about covering his tracks, I might have simply accepted losing this place entirely, believing it reflected some genuine final decision from Dad, rather than a scheme constructed after he could no longer effectively protect his own intentions. Reflecting on family. My relationship with Anton remains fractured beyond any realistic possibility of repair, the litigation having exposed a level of calculated betrayal that feels impossible to reconcile with whatever remained of our sibling relationship before our father's death. "Do you think he genuinely believed he deserved the bakery?" Wilhelmina asked me once. "Or was this purely about the financial value of the property and business?" "I think it was both," I said. "I think years of watching me build something significant while he pursued a different path eventually curdled into genuine resentment. Resentment he apparently decided justified defrauding both me and our father's actual final wishes, rather than simply accepting the different paths we'd each chosen. What I know now. People sometimes ask if I regret pursuing the forensic investigation and subsequent litigation, given the additional months of grief and conflict it required layering on top of losing my father. I don't see it that way at all. What began as a single, nagging observation about a signature that looked uncharacteristically smooth ultimately exposed a calculated scheme between my brother and our family's own trusted attorney, one that would have permanently stripped me of 30 years of work and my father's genuine, consistently stated final wishes, if I hadn't trusted my own instinctive suspicion enough to pursue proper forensic verification. Where I am now. Marchetti's Bakery continues operating today exactly as my father envisioned it, under my full ownership and management, carrying forward a legacy he built across 4 decades and consistently intended to pass directly to me. I've since updated my own estate planning documents with meticulous attention to verification procedures, informed directly by exactly how vulnerable even a well-documented family relationship can become when someone is determined to exploit a parent's declining health for personal financial gain. Some mornings, opening the bakery before dawn the way I have for 30 years, I still think about that moment in Barnaby's office, staring at a signature that looked wrong before I could even articulate exactly why. I think about how close I came to simply accepting that unfairness as my father's genuine final decision, and how grateful I remain that my own attention to detail, honed through decades of meticulous bookkeeping, gave me the instinct to question a document everyone else expected me to simply, quietly accept.